Want to be sure that you don't miss a single video or blog post? Hit the bell icon on the channel page and hit save to enable your notifications. Be sure to select the notification setting that fits you best. Are you not a fan or don't want to receive notifications? Just jump straight to your subscriptions page to view the latest videos from your favorite creators and channels. You can learn more about how to support your favorite creators and bloggers here. We'll also provide a link in the description below. Thank you for joining me for this video. We're continuing the Building a Debt-Free Home video series, and today we want to jump into the topic of finances or money. There's so much that we could share on this topic. There's no way we could pack all this into 1, 5, or even 10 videos. So we don't want to give advice. We simply want to share some of the thinking and the strategies behind what we're doing, and we're hoping that maybe for those folks who are on a journey like this, they might find something that kind of opens their mind and helps them. By no means are we saying this is how it should be done. There's no way we could know everyone's circumstances. These are simply our circumstances. I want to make a quick comment about critics. There's a lot of comments on our last video about us kind of caving to critics or listening to critics. And that's not completely untrue, but let me just share an idea about critics. We feel like critics are a necessary component to doing a journey like this. See, if we were stuck with only our own ideas, I don't know that they would ever evolve. And so while a lot of criticism is kind of just blank and empty, we feel like it's kind of like the opposing point of view. So for every viewpoint, there's almost always another way to look at that. And so critics kind of provide us with that. Yeah, it doesn't feel that great sometimes, and it hurts a little bit, hurts our ego mostly, but we try to take it with a grain of salt. We try. And so sometimes when we're kind of addressing the critics, it's kind of a way of us explaining the thinking behind the things that we do. And we feel like anybody who's going on this journey, you better get ready for criticism because it's coming. And if you can kind of look at it that way, that critics are actually beneficial to a degree, they help challenge your mind and make sure that you're sure of what you're doing. They're meant to kind of deepen your conviction about something. That's part of why we share thoughts on the topic, because that way other people who are maybe taking a journey like this can understand how we respond to the criticism, and that will help them to prepare for it themselves. Quite a few people have said that our early videos were really amazing, and now it's almost like we fell off the deep end, we've lost our way. This reminds me of a good sports season or a good racing season. It's fun to watch a really successful sports team go for it and get that championship. But what a lot of people don't see is all the pre-work that went into a successful season, all the practices, the scouting, the research, the planning, all that went into the execution. And so, yeah, these videos are kind of dry. I mean, they're not exciting. We're not running heavy equipment. There's not a lot of dust flying. We feel like for the right people, this part of the journey is as more critical than showing the nails getting pounded or boards getting cut, because it's the foundation of a successful execution. Let's jump into the topic of finances. I do want to ask out of the gate, if you have questions about the money side of this project, please comment them or share them with us on our blog or Facebook. We're not sure that we'll be able to address all those, but it'll help us to kind of shape the videos. First, let me give you a little bit of background on Alyssa and I as it pertains to money. First of all, we're not trust fund babies. We're not independently wealthy. Alyssa actually comes from a traditional background. She has a college degree, and when I first met her, she was working a traditional corporate job. At that time, I was actually running a small business that I had started, and as we began to discuss this journey, we realized that neither of our incomes, though they're very different in nature, were going to work if we wanted to pursue this journey. And so we made the decision early on that we wanted to switch our income to a location agnostic income, meaning we don't have to be anywhere specific to earn a living. We have to earn a living. We're not rich. We have to work every single day. for our living. And we do. We work extremely hard. In fact, it's kind of a blessing and a curse that we can work anywhere, because that means we also work anytime. And often we put in 18 or 20-hour days. It's not rare. We have had to basically execute a career shift. We have switched from the backgrounds that we originally had built as income earners, and we've had to learn a completely new business, a completely new skill to be able to do this. Now, is that practical for everybody? No, we wouldn't necessarily encourage most people to take this path. But we know people who have started homesteading who do have lucrative skills that they can do in a particular location. We can get jobs, and we're not above doing that, but we've chosen to try this path, and if it works, we'll stick with it. We knew when we started planning this journey that we wanted to live in a fairly rural or remote area, and that meant probably an economy that wasn't as strong as one we were accustomed to. That put us in a position where we had to really think carefully about being dependent on the local economy, something we weren't confident we could do. That career shift has taken us over 4 years to execute. Is this possible for an average person? Yes. The number of ways that you can earn an income through the internet is pretty limitless, and you don't have to be highly skilled to do it. This video is not about how to earn an income on the internet, but just know that there are a lot of opportunities and a lot of possibilities out there for everyone. Another part of our strategy, and this goes back years, is to build assets. Something that I learned fairly young as a business owner was the power of assets. What are those? Those are things that have value that as needed can be liquefied. So they might not be money, they might be in a more physical form like a business or a rental, something like that. And when you need cash flow or you need some money to do something, you can convert those assets into cash. We didn't just show up here one day and say, all right, we're gonna figure it out. You know, the planning that went into this project goes back more than a decade. There's a biblical passage that goes something like this: what man builds a house who does not first calculate its cost? And I think if you just look at that phrase in its obvious form, you might deduce that the cost is money. But I don't know that that's the deepest form of that passage. Cost isn't always about money. It can be about many things. And for a lot of reasons, I'm glad we didn't start the house when we arrived. We would have built a home that I don't think we would have ultimately long-term been really happy with. It would have been bottlenecked by our budget, and there would have a lot of other peripheral costs like Alyssa and I's relationship, our skills, the future of this project. Another critical component to the money and income side of this project is that most people who are building a home or going through a property development project cannot go very long without an income. So they can't withstand a gap in income. And that's another reason that Alyssa and I focused so much on creating a passive income. And we rely on the internet to do that. We've done everything from coaching to digital products, building websites, writing for people, doing graphic design, photography, video work. The list is endless. But the nice thing about this income stream is that it comes in day to day, whether we work day to day or not. For example, in the fall, I had to leave the property to do some work on my rental, and I was gone for over a month. And so in that time, I didn't work on our income at all. Let's jump to another topic related to financing, and that is the initial expenses of making the land livable. If you've been following our journey for a while, you know that we've been working on our solar. We had a septic system installed fairly quickly after we arrived, and we've also been working on our potable and fresh water systems. There are a couple other projects out there that were up front to make the property livable that maybe weren't critical. Well, one of them was the driveway. That kind of blindsided us. We might do that video on that later because we learned some really critical lessons in that project. The other one was our deck and our hot tub. Some might feel that that was a luxury. We don't feel that way. We're making so many sacrifices to live the way we are today. We thought it was wise to give ourselves one small comfort, and we have not regretted that for one single day. If we would have just showed up here one day and built a house, we would not know what we know today, having lived here for over a year. You have to remember that although we're off-grid right now, we've never said that we'll never be an on-grid home, or we'll tie this property into the grid. So right now we're just learning, we're practicing, and I could totally see if we had maybe moved elsewhere and then, as money and time allowed, improved the property and then showed up one day and built this great off-grid property. I don't know if we would have loved it or not. We're certainly learning a lot of hard-learned lessons without being connected to the utility grid. We don't want to close those doors yet. So we're trying out the off-grid life, and we'll decide at some point whether we want to stay this way or we want to maybe move toward the typical on-grid home. It would be one thing if Alyssa and I had a vast background with water system engineering or electrical engineering or any of these things, and we don't. We have some knowledge, and especially myself, I've been around building projects most of my life, so I'm not a complete bumbling idiot when it comes to these things. But there are so many tiny details, and taking the time to just learn. This really goes back to what I said at the beginning of this video. The planning stage is what takes forever. That's the first wake-up call we got on this project, was that it seems like it takes forever to plan something. The day you actually do the project, it's almost like it's gone, it's done. It takes maybe a couple, 3 days, maybe a week at the most to complete a project. But the planning, the budget, sizing, components, sourcing the components, shipping, getting everything here, equipment rental, labor, all that stuff, my gosh, it's a lot. Another resounding lesson that we have learned so far when it comes to cost is the cost of doing something the cheap way. And kind of working with just what you have. Now, we're not opposed to doing that, but there's definitely a cost that you pay. There's a saying out there that says, if you can't afford to do it right the first time, can you afford to do it again? And we're learning that. We've done a lot of that on this project. We've kind of done what it takes to get it done, type of thing. And we're paying for that because we're having to do things twice. We're having to fix and repair things. Things are getting broken. Some of it's just aesthetics, or some of it's kind of ergonomics. It's frustrating. So there's more cost to this than just money, but there is a physical cost to it. When we arrived on our property, we didn't show up with a huge trailer full of contractor tools, concrete mixers and saws and planes and all this stuff. We had some pretty basic tools. My grandpa and my dad actually gave us a fairly decent set of tools, many of which we've already used, but we've had to source a lot. In fact, I remember when we first arrived, I felt like we were on a spending spree. And it wasn't because we were just excited, but we just needed a lot. Big things like a chainsaw, which has been critical. We needed a four-wheeler. We needed a trailer. All of those things. And I guess those weren't really in the budget because we didn't see that stuff coming, although we should have, because we really didn't have any of the tools that you need to live in the country. We came from a city. We didn't have any room for all that stuff, let alone a need. All the tools and everything that we needed to get started, well, that wasn't factored into the budget, and that had a direct and immediate impact on our bank account. Every single one of those tools that we bought, we have used, and we continue to use day in and day out. So they were a good investment, but we thought, we'll just put all of our money toward our house. Didn't happen. Next, I want to talk a little bit about reclaimed materials. This is a really powerful thing when it comes to building without incurring any debt. However, we kind of did a little bit of that. We tore down a barn and a house that we had that was available to us, and it was a heck of a deal. We got a ton of materials, and that's actually what we built this cabin out of. The only thing on this cabin that we paid money for was the clear plastic that we use for passive solar. So that was really cool, and it was a vast learning experience. That said, it definitely starts to really restrict what you can build. Reclaimed material sounds really good until you realize how much damage is done to the materials, what's left that you can actually use, the amount of preparation, pulling all the nails, and something very few people talk about is the potential damage to tools as you work with those materials. For example, we bought a beautiful DeWalt saw. The blade on that saw is about $50, and if you hit a nail in one of these reclaimed boards, that's a $50 board. So suddenly that board gets really expensive. We feel like we've learned using reclaimed materials to some degree. And we're not opposed to doing that, but when it comes to the shell, we feel like the shell of the house, we're probably going to focus more on using new materials. Once the house is dried in, we feel like we have a lot more doors open to us to kind of pick and choose whether we want to do auctions or estate sales or Craigslist or eBay, or things like that, to find materials at very low or no cost. But when it comes to building the foundation and the exterior of the home, That's a tough one. We feel like with the cabin, we would have probably built a very different cabin had we not used reclaimed materials. We probably would have done things a lot differently. If you haven't, there's actually a video out there we did about how we got $7,000 in materials. That's part of what kept us from starting our house, was that we had such an overwhelming response of people who just had leftover thises and thatses, that we end up running around for over a month picking up materials, much of which we haven't used yet. They're still sitting in storage. But we picked up sinks, travertine, windows, insulation, solar cable, a lot of really valuable stuff. And I think we paid pennies on the dollar for all that stuff. So there is definitely a way to do that and to barter for it and find the materials that you need at very low cost. But just realize, everything costs something. So if you're going to go that path, a resounding lesson we learned is the trade-off for time. Now, if you live a life like this, you might end up with more time. But just realize, nothing's free. You either have to pay in time or pay in money. And so bartering and finding reclaimed stuff is fun. You meet a lot of really cool people. You find some really cool stuff, but it's not free. So that does it for this video. If you have questions or comments as it relates to the finances or money side of this, please leave them in the comment section below. Message us on the blog or hit us with a Facebook message. We'll try to make sure that we factor those into the future videos. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you next time.